into the problem of evil. Let us begin with a question.
Kia ora, now mai haramai to another episode of Curiously Catholic, the Evangelion podcast. As you can see to my left here, my bike is here. I've got a new setup in my garage. I have a desk now, which I built with my dad, which is really exciting. And I have an LED panel over there, which is why I look so lit up right now. So it's very exciting times. And to christen, to break in this new equipment, I've got a Jesuit priest all the way from Australia who's going to be speaking at Hearts of Flame this summer camp coming up. Father Robin Koning. Am I saying that right, Father?
Robin Koning, yeah.
I think I'm going to get that wrong all the time. I just did a podcast with a girl called April, and I've known her for a long time, and the first time ever on the podcast, I called her Rachel. So, I don't know what's going on there.
Not May or June or anything. Just
no.
Rachel.
It was funny because someone watched that episode and said, "Hey, I really like your stuff," and they were trying to sell me on something. And I said, "Oh yeah, April's really good." She said, "Yes, April is a very good month." It's like, you didn't watch the episode, did you? You were just trying to sell me on things. But Father Robin, so you're going to be speaking at Hearts of Flame this. You've been there a few times, haven't you?
I have, yeah. Yep. Yeah, 3 or 4 times, I think. Yeah.
I think, it'd be quite a few years ago. No, about 3 or 4 years ago, I think I met you afterwards because you came and spoke at the Auckland Catholic Tertiary Chaplaincy to the chaplains, and I was one of those chaplains.
Oh, yes, yeah. Ah, right. I thought you looked familiar. Yeah, right. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, so, I was working with Shana. I think at the time she was Yorando, but now she's Graham. I was working with Shana and a few others, and she'd seen you at Hearts of Flame, thought your stuff was really good, and so I said, "Hey, you should come to talk to us," and you did.
I did.
Yeah. So you're in Sydney.
You're
a Jesuit.
Yep. I am.
Those are all very interesting things. But I want to crack into a few things. Because you're going to be talking at Hearts of Flame on discernment. Mm-hmm. And I think that's just a topic that you could talk forever about and still have more things to say. But also, I think the concept of religious orders is a super interesting one. So I was wondering, before we crack into all the discernment stuff, could you give us a bit of a rundown? What exactly are the Jesuits?
Okay, well, the Jesuits are a religious order that was started in the early 16th century by St. Ignatius Loyola after his conversion. I suppose we call it reversion today because he grew up Catholic but wasn't much involved in it. But after he had a big accident in war and had a long recovery period, gave him a chance to think about things. He started sharing his spiritual experiences with people, eventually gathered a group of people around him at the University of Paris, people like St. Francis Xavier and St. Peter Faber, 3 of them, 3 saints, all shared rooms together there. Oh, wow. And they decided ultimately to start a religious order and make themselves available to the Pope for wherever he wanted to send them.
That's pretty cool. I think that right there, that's really good. That's a really good spiritual lesson for us of how do we live our life. Because he started out, he was kind of put into a desert experience in the sense that, I think he'd injured his leg or something, and so he was stuck. But all he could read were lives of the saints, and that ultimately led him to get closer to God. And then he was surrounded by 2 people that also became saints, and they started the religious order. And I think, what do they say? The 5 people you spend most time with, that influences who you become. And
right,
so,
yes,
you should probably, what you put into your brain is important. If you're reading romance novels and stuff, it's going to be romance and everything that comes with that. But if you're looking at the saints, you're going to be thinking about more holy things.
And that's exactly what happened to Ignatius. He would have much preferred to be reading about, it was the late medieval period, times of knights and chivalry and doing great deeds of honor to attract the attention of the princess or whatever. So he wanted to read stuff like that, but there wasn't any available there. So he had, as you said, a life of the saints, also a life of Christ. So while he continued daydreaming about doing chivalrous deeds and winning glory that way, and that gave him a certain amount of delight. He was also starting to read about the saints, and Saint Francis did this. Maybe I could do that as well, and recognizing this option of channeling his energies and his chivalry and his great courage and
Mm.
generosity towards Christ rather than just his own glory.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that was really the beginning of what we'll be talking about mainly today, this discernment of spirits, where he felt excited when he was thinking about um, chivalry and being knights and that, and as well as when he was thinking about following the saints. But he realized that when he thought about the more worldly stuff, it wasn't a lasting delight. And when he stopped thinking about it, he was felt pretty dry and dissipated and empty.
Mm.
Whereas when he pondered being like the saints, then that joy, that sense of excitement continued, it perdured over time. And that began the beginning of this sense of there are different things happening here, different movements in my spirit. They're not just random; they have
Mm.
some meaning, and I can make choices based on that. Yeah,
That's really cool. And yeah, that concept of like he was gifted these desires. Um, and I think whenever we think of like saints and holiness, these words are kind of alienating sometimes of, oh, I could never do that, or that's for those people over there. Like, especially in New Zealand, we've got that tall poppy syndrome. You see someone succeeding and we just chop them down a bit. And you prefer the underdog. But because the saints inspire things in people, and I feel that it's an interesting idea because you even hear like I think I heard someone that was on like Joe Rogan or some secular podcast, and they told the story of Saint Ignatius to prove one of their points, and it was just a vague thing like, oh yeah, well he just started reading these books and then he started this order, like brief overview. But they also mentioned this story which I thought was quite interesting, and it fits into this talking about the real human element of St. Ignatius was so apparently he was on a path going somewhere and he was followed by, I believe, a Muslim, and he was like, I'm going to kill this guy. And so obviously he was having this external reality and this internal reality, this battle of like, so he's the enemy, and him being a warrior and being chivalrous and having formed himself in that until his reversion was like, I'm going to kill him because that's what we do. You kill the enemy, and until there was like a fork in the road or something, he's like, all right, if he goes that way, I won't, or something like that. And so, could you like maybe elaborate on the story, or like tell us a bit more about how those gifts within Saint Ignatius and how maybe they can be within us as well?
sure. Yeah. Well, just to correct to that version of the story a little,
Right,
he
please do.
didn't. He was on his donkey. This is after his conversion, so he's left the family castle in Loyola in the Basque Country and is heading down towards Barcelona to get a ship to the Holy Land. So he's on his donkey. A Moor, a Muslim, comes beside him. They're having quite a friendly conversation. It's not just this instinctive, I'm going to kill this guy. Um, uh, but they're talking about the Blessed Virgin Mary, who, Muslims have great respect for. But the Muslim was challenging the idea of her perpetual virginity throughout life.
Right.
And Ignatius was doing his best to explain that. And afterwards, the Moor goes on, and Ignatius is wondering, well, did I defend Mary's honor well enough? Again, this sense of chivalry. I'm meant to be defending the great queen. Did I defend her honor well enough? Maybe I should go after this guy and knife him or something. But it was in that, so it wasn't just a random. It was still a bit,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
misguided, but it was this sense of honor. And he couldn't. He was just very agitated within himself. He was still early in this process of understanding discernment. So eventually he said, well, I'll let the donkey choose. If it takes the road that the Moor took, then I'll attack him. If not, so thankfully, wisely, the donkey took the other road. Otherwise, the Jesuits may never have existed. He ended up in jail or something.
Yeah.
So that was what was happening there. Yeah. So, and it was this sense of, yeah, it was still very much in the early stages of learning how do I process these things going on within me in a way that's wise and directed by the Spirit. Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing how God works through donkeys. Like in the Old Testament, there's that donkey that spoke to one of the prophets. Obviously,
Yes.
Jesus came walking in a donkey, and then The Jesuit order would have
That's
been
true.
nothing without without one.
Without the donkey. Yes,
Hey,
yes, yeah.
it makes me feel better for being an ass. Anyway,
But I
um,
think your point about desires is, that's a very key word for Ignatius to be in touch with our, our deepest desires. We've all got
mm,
desires at a whole range of levels, of course, and some of them we don't want to pursue. But what's deepest within me, and trusting that in that I will find where God is leading me if I peel away the different levels of
mm,
desire over time and find what is deepest within me, what's been planted there.
right,
Yeah.
right. So cracking on with a bit more about the Jesuits. So that's how you guys started, and you guys are carrying on. Um, I'm not an expert in the Jesuits or any religious order, to be honest. I like the idea of them, of a band of blokes generally that say, "Hey, we could find a way of life to do things." Or there are obviously female orders as well, and say, "Hey, I've got this way of life. I'm going to get a group together and we're going to do this thing." It's kind of entrepreneurial. It's exciting. It's a mission. So I love like the ideas of orders. Um, the Jesuits, I've never really looked into too much. The only exposure I've really had of them is Saint Ignatius, Pope Francis, and Father James Martin. And so, like nowadays, there's a lot of kind of tension I feel around the letters SJ. Whenever you see them around, it's like, what do the Jesuits stand for, and like, who are they? Obviously, they come from a very good place, and we're all human. So I was wondering, how how do we? What would you say is a good way to perceive the Jesuits, and how would you respond to maybe how they've been represented in contemporary media?
Well, it's a big order and it's represented, different ways. There's so many Jesuits in the world, and they get a bit of a mixed reception.
Mm,
I think the uh, part of that is that we've always been encouraged by the popes, by the church, to be at the edges, to be at the
mm,
frontiers. Various popes have talked about that. Pope Leo just met recently with the provincials of the Jesuits from all around the world, the heads of the different provinces. They were having a meeting in Rome and they went and had an audience with him. And again, in his speech there, he reiterated what Paul VI had already said. I'm just getting the quote up here before me. Paul VI had said, wherever in the church, even in the most difficult and extreme fields, at the crossroads of ideologies, there have been and there are Jesuits. Um, and Pope Benedict XVI says similar thing, people of deep faith, sound culture, to serve at the frontiers. Um, so I think whenever you're talking about serving at the frontiers, where, in Francis Xavier's time was very much the geographical frontiers, going to the ends of the world. Um, and then there were the frontiers with science, so many Jesuit scientists over the years
mm,
engaging with faith and science and stuff like that. Frontier with cultures, frontiers with the poor, the light world of justice. Um, there's always you're going to be, it's going to seem controversial at times, I think. Um, but and I'm not saying Jesuits always get that right, but
mm,
that's the impetus is this call of the church to us to
mm.
be to be at places of frontiers, places where there is risk, places where there's no familiar maps, where
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
uncharted territory, whether intellectually or geographically. Um, so that's one of the things we do. If it was a big word in Pope Francis often talked about the whole church, going to the peripheries, not staying locked up within ourselves, but being at the peripheries.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
I think that is one of the um, things that I've really appreciated from Pope Francis and indeed Father James. I mean, I don't feel like I'm qualified enough to say whether they've done it in the right or the wrong way, for that matter. But I do think there are a lot of things that are kind of realities in our world today that don't have a clear answer, and it seemed that as you've kind of talked about going out to peripheries, there is the Jesuits are a group that are saying, "Hey, let's go out there, let's look into these things and try and discuss them." Um, I mean, so
Yeah,
but
I think that's always been the impetus, and from the
mm,
start, you talked about these, these first guys, Faber and Xavier and Ignatius,
mm,
planning to set up an order, but that was never their initial intention. I mean, they did commit to share their resources and stuff, but Plan B was really to go to the Pope and offer themselves. Their first plan was to go to the Holy Land, live a simple life, to be close to where Jesus lived, and
mm,
preach there. If they couldn't get a ship there, because there were lots of conflicts around the Mediterranean, so there wasn't any guarantee of getting a ship. They gave themselves a year, I think. If we don't get a ship, then we'll go to Rome and offer ourselves to the Pope. Um, and even then, I think they thought they would stay together as a group. There were 9 of them by then, I think.
oh wow,
Um, but the Pope immediately started sending them out in twos to different places, 2 to go to the Council of Trent and 2 to go here. So they realized they're going to be dispersed. So how do we stay together? How do we keep connected? And that's where they eventually decided, we're going to become a religious order,
okay.
and be available wherever the Pope sends us.
And so, how did that How did them becoming an order? How did that function as keeping them connected? Because I imagine in that time, obviously, there was no internet or cell phones, so splitting a group of 9 guys up into twos or maybe even threes,
Yeah.
however they did it. That is like, how do you keep connected in that time? So, okay, a religious order. So what does that? How does that make you connected?
I think because you'd elect a leader who would be the one, under the Pope, who'd be missioning you, and you'd be at that stage keeping connected through letters largely and
Mm,
correspondence. A huge correspondence, a lot of emphasis from Saint Ignatius on regular letters back to Rome, and from Rome to the peripheries.
mm.
So certainly united in heart, union of minds and hearts, but also concretely, through, obviously connection with the people you're living with, but also through lots of correspondence. But the sense of having a superior general, one who is responsible for
So it's
for
kind of, yeah,
uh,
it's kind of
to,
having
to
that
whom you're.
that
It
way
was a
of
vow of
life.
obedience, ultimately.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So having that way
and
of
being
life is okay. If you don't know what to do, here's our rules, and if there's something else that comes up, talk to me. That's kind of
sure.
the concept of it, is it? Okay, that's
Yeah,
cool. That's cool. I mean, I think, like I said, I think religious orders are really interesting, and especially nowadays, I wouldn't be surprised if there are more people trying to create religious orders. I think they're like the kind of Gen Z and Gen X or whatever gens we're at the moment. I think we're at Gen A again. We've started all over. But anyway,
that's
um,
where I started. I'm Gen A. Yeah,
oh, you're yeah. Maybe it's just double
I'm
A.
old enough to be Gen A back there.
um, so yeah, I feel like there is that more push of that entrepreneurial spirit of like, let's go out and create our own, let's find our own way. And I think it seems that like there is a mix of people wanting to, yeah, again, find their own way, but also return to a tradition. And so I wouldn't be surprised if there are like people trying to form orders. But at the same time, having heard this story, you don't form an order. You live a prayerful life with a group of mates, if you will. Uh, and I think that's something that I've been discerning. We're getting into the topic now. Discerning. I've been discerning a lot recently, is because I'm constantly trying to create some sort of fraternal group, and it always ends up being okay. Now I've got a chat group with 20 people. None of us are really connected. We're just on a chat group, or there's this Facebook group, or there's this, whatever you want to call it, and the kind of the spiritual element of it, the prayerful element, it breaks down due to the vast amount of people. And it sounds like, the Jesuit order at least didn't start out that way. I believe the Dominican order is a similar story, just one guy slowly like deciding to live a particular way, and then people being attracted to that and wanting to uh, first and foremost pray and then serve. Um, so it sounds like that's a pretty good way to live, a way of life. It's a suggestion of how do you be Catholic? Prayer and prayer and service, by the sounds of it. Um, Karen.
No, I think that's right. Yeah, prayer service and community, obviously, community
Mm, yeah,
involvement in the
I
life of the church. But I think these things do grow out of, if I'm focusing on my spiritual life and leading. Pope Francis talks about this in Christus Viva, talking about vocational discernment, that reminds us that the foundational vocation is our baptismal vocation, to stay close to Christ, to live out our baptism, and any particular vocations grow out of that. You're not going to discover your particular vocation if you're not seeking to live your baptismal vocation through prayer and service, engagement in the sacraments, a life in community, living in some sort of connection with other Catholics. That's the context in which we discern particular vocations. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot going on in the world, and the Jesuits are tackling those questions. They're trying to come up with answers, and they started out by trying to. The reason they started is because they wanted to serve the world and they needed to stay connected, and so they came up with this way of life. So I think you're online nowadays, and if you want advice on something, just type it into Google, YouTube, whatever, and there's a million people out there trying to tell you the right answer, and they're based in psychology or some sort of religious text or just their own opinion, really. So, like we said, Ignatius was like a leader in discernment, and online nowadays we've got all this noise. So how would you say that we could apply his principles to knowing which voices to listen to online and which ones that are probably not for us?
It's a good question, and I think a really important one. The I think you probably say the first thing is don't be online quite so much. Give yourself space for silence, to pray, to reflect on these things. It's very easy to get addicted to online stuff, scrolling through. So I give retreats to young adults, weekend retreats, silent retreats, and I encourage them. I'm not going to take their phones from them. I say before they come into the retreat, be good, not to use your devices during the retreat as far as you can. If you use your phone for an alarm clock, maybe think of actually bringing an alarm clock or something, so you're not tempted to go onto it even to check the time or whatever. And some of them say it was the best. It was sort of hard for a while. Even this is just like Friday night till Sunday lunchtime, but actually it was a very good experience for them to just have that space from the clutter and the addiction, really. And the Immaculata community here in Australia, they have a summer school a bit similar to Hearts of Flame. Sadly, they're both on at exactly the same time, so I can never get to both of them.
Oh, no.
But they're 10 days, but they actually take phones. The kids hand in their phones. These are teenagers through to young adults. They can get them if they need to make an urgent call or whatever, and their parents can call the leaders if they're worried about something. But and some, I've heard a lot of these young people say, it was the best time just not to worry about all that. It could be present in the moment, present to the community they were with, take in the talks, join in the fun activities, not have this distraction. So I think the first thing would be, not to give it up entirely, but to make sure we are giving time within our lives to just silent prayer, time with the Lord, so that we can process some of the sort of. Ignatius had 9 months without distraction on his convalescent bed, which is where his conversion came. So I think that'd be the first thing. The other thing, Ignatius's rules for discernment, being attentive to spiritual consolation, spiritual desolations, and having that reflectiveness. Okay, look back on. Okay, I've just spent an hour scrolling through YouTube. How do I actually feel after that? Might have been exciting while I did it, but am I feeling? Has it actually been uplifting? Has it just dissipated my energies, made me a bit depressed or down or whatever? And taking that seriously. This is a movement within. With psychological elements, but may also have spiritual elements where it's sapping my spiritual energy. So part of the danger of the stuff, it's so readily available that we don't take those spaces, actually say, okay, this might feel good in the moment, but looking back on it, is this actually something that is sustaining me? is it something that, as Ignatius found when he daydreamed about his worldly enterprises, he was a great daydreamer. That was all very exciting, but he felt dissipated and pretty empty afterwards. When
Right.
he pondered the lives of the saints, he was excited when he read them, and that sense of joy perdured. So I think that basic attentiveness to those inner movements, not just getting lost in the outer distraction, uh, and to give time to that, yeah, I think that's be at the heart of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, if we were to boil it down to kind of 2 points, I mean, I suppose there's well, a couple of things come to mind. Is like first, it's remove yourself from maybe your everyday, and if your everyday is you're either on the phone, you're in front of an iPad, you're in front of a probably not a TV nowadays, but in front of like a
Mm.
movie or something, if that's your like downtime, say okay, maybe remove yourself from at least some of that. But I suppose with the second point in mind of consider yourself in those moments. How are you
Mm.
feeling? How is what you're feeling actually going to be improved by using devices, or is it just going to be numbed for a moment and you forget about it and it's going to come back later with a bit of a vengeance?
Mm.
Like, am I actually hungry right now, or do I just feel like eating a chocolate bar? I mean, those
Mm.
sort of questions. So like it's like that. It's like remove yourself and then contemplate yourself. Think about what's going on inside you to make you want to
Yeah,
do that, or what effect it's having on you. Does that sound about right
yeah.
where you are?
I think so. Yeah, that sense of attentiveness to what's going on within. It's so easy to be distracted by the external, and with digital devices, it's even more than usual. And people sometimes talk to me about prayer and getting a rhythm of prayer, and
Mm,
I'm just so busy I can't do that. And I sometimes ask, well, how much time did you spend on YouTube today?
right. Yeah. Yeah.
Or scrolling stuff. We can
Yes.
usually find time if we want to, um, and not necessarily long periods of time, but having a rhythm of prayer,
Yeah.
a daily rhythm where even if it's 10 minutes in the morning of reading through scripture or just sitting silently, or and then that for Ignatius the prayer at the end of the day, the examined prayer of looking back over the day,
Mm,
precisely in terms of not simply examination of conscience, where have I gone wrong, that's part of it, but also these inner movements, what were the moments during the day where I felt a sense of the Lord's closeness, a sense of peace and joy, and what was going on there. Where did I feel a heaviness, a discouragement? What was
mm,
going on there? And learning from those concrete realities of my life to be in touch with them.
mm.
Um,
Yeah. These are really cool things that it's like you need to sit with those and actually go into them in yourself, because it's like we can come up with principles and rules, but it's different for every person. And I feel often when we come up with anyone comes up with suggestions, or like, oh, here's like 5 things that you need to be doing for better XYZ, name the thing. Um, the initial reaction can be like, yeah, that doesn't work with me. I'd never do that. Um, but I suppose we need to ask ourselves, what's the truth in that is applicable to me? What is that? And again, it's coming back to exactly what we're talking about. Is think about how you are impacted. Like how are you in this sentence? Where are you in this sentence? Where are you in this teaching? Um, Especially when it comes to like spiritual things, maybe. Because I
yes,
think
I
now.
think sorry,
No, you carry on.
the the yeah, and I think recognizing there's I think the value of the examined prayer, it's recognizing that there's a lot more going on in the spiritual life than simply, have I sinned or have I not sinned?
Mm,
That's sort of a pretty important bottom line. But there's a lot more richness to our spiritual lives, to the movements of God within us than simply that.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. I
and
think
especially as we
Karen?
Especially as we get move further and further in the moral life, and claim Christ's victory over some of the more overt sins, then some of those more subtle movements become clearer and more important to be in touch with. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think like in life with like nowadays there is a I probably every it's probably every, this is just a human situation. We want black and white. We want right wrong. Wish every sin was a mortal sin, then we'd know. None of this like vague stuff. But there is the reality of life. But also, I think in Christianity is that it isn't a set of rules. It's not it's not your marching orders. It's a relationship with Christ, and the rules that have been discovered have been discovered out of relationship. So, you can say, your relationship with your wife. My wife loves hydrangeas, so if I get her hydrangeas, she's gonna like them, especially purple hydrangeas. They will be her favorite. If I gave her purple hydrangeas every day, she would not like me or the hydrangeas anymore. It's not a case of all right, she likes purple hydrangeas, boom, I'm gonna do that, or I just cook her a nice meal. I don't know, some sort of, fish and chips, let's just say. She likes fish and chips. Okay, fish and chips every night because she likes fish and chips, and we'll put hydrangeas on the table. And eventually you're breaking the relationship by following a rule. And I think that's the tension in faith, especially I feel like in Catholicism, because, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, but a observation I've made is when it comes to like the church fathers, they say that if Protestants look into the church fathers, they'll become Catholics. And so there's a lot of pushback of like, why would we look at the church fathers? We've got the scriptures. And the reason you would look at the church fathers is because Jesus didn't come down and give us a book. He built a relationship which the church fathers had. Well, or were close, had a relationship with the people that had a relationship with Christ. And so the reason you would listen to the church fathers is because of relationship. So why would you stop having relationships when Jesus came down to have relationships? Is kind of my observation around how do we discern rules? It's like, how do we build a relationship?
Mm.
Do you have any thoughts on that particular?
No, I think it's a very interesting way of putting the question of the church fathers, and that I think that's exactly right. Jesus didn't give us a book. The church, the community of disciples of Jesus existed before the New Testament existed, and the fathers are those who are closest in relationship to Jesus and to the whole mindset of that ancient world.
Mm.
And Yeah, and I think the rules, you've got church rules, you've got moral laws, obviously, but they're all predicated on, they all find their fullness or their full meaning in the context of a living relationship with Jesus within His church, don't they?
Mm.
And I think that's exactly right. And all the popes and saints have talked about this. That we're not preaching ultimately a creed, but a person, the living person of Jesus.
Mm. Which is, again, something that our Protestant brothers and sisters are also very fervent about. It's like, how is your relationship with Christ? And
Sure.
as a Catholic,
Yeah.
it's like it's so close that I'm in relationship with everyone that he was in relationship with throughout time. Um, but like getting back to discernment, one of the most as a useful and most annoying phrases in contemporary vocabulary is the term vibe. It's like, that's a vibe. I'm getting good vibes off this. I'm getting bad vibes off this. It seems annoying, but it's also really useful because it does explain something that people experience. I'm getting a feeling of this, or this is one I'm not quite understood how to use it. It's like it's giving, and they will say something. It's giving I don't know. I hear people use it, but I can't use it myself.
Oh,
But anyway,
okay, I haven't heard that one. No.
I think it's more of an American thing. But I think it is an element in discernment. What kind of vibe are you feeling in this situation? And I was wondering because Jesuits are known for starting like universities and schools around the world, and so obviously there is an academic, intellectual development kind of um, principle there. Uh, Jesuits are there for the furtherment of your growing your brain and becoming academically good. So how does this fit with discernment? Because I feel the discernment is a lot more emotional. There is at least an emotional element that you have to listen to, and someone might say what vibe it's giving off. If you're thinking which of these ideas are giving you good vibes, it would be a discernment question, right?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. And I mean, you're right. We are heavily involved intellectually in schools, and again, it wasn't part of Ignatius's original plan. He'd set up colleges to train Jesuits, and he wanted them well formed academically as well as spiritually. But then the noblemen wanted they could see the value of this education. There wasn't much of a structured education system then. With a clear sense of curriculum and going through different stages. Um, and they wanted their sons to have the same sort of training. So once Ignatius recognized the apostolic value of this, then we became the schoolmasters of Europe was the phrase at one point. Schools all over the place. So I think that sense of a depth of intellectual engagement and a depth of spirituality are the two things that the church keeps coming back and asking of us as Jesuits. Um, and I think they hold together well. It's in terms of discernment. I suppose firstly, and we tend to use discernment today in terms of discerning, making decisions, discerning a vocation or something, which is a fair enough use. Um, Ignatius, when he talks about that side of things, in the exercise he talks about making an election, like electing a government, making a choice, electing to do something. I think that's not that we need to use that language, but just to be clear, when we're talking about discernment, there is decision making. There's the day to day being in touch with the movements of my heart, which may not be leading into any particular decision. It's just being aware of myself. But I think the value of the election language is it reminds us that we do need to make a choice at some point. God's not going to make the choice for us. I can discern, forever. Talk about the
Yeah, my
that you
friend
do
used
need at some
to
point.
my friend used to make
Yep.
a joke of saying she's starting a new order, the Sisters of Perpetual Discernment. They're going to call
Yes, yes,
themselves none of the above.
yeah. I think in that sense, yeah, we do. God's going to help us to make the decision. He's not going to make the decision for us.
Mm,
When he talks about discernment of spirits, so these rules for the discernment of spirits, which he gives us in spiritual exercises, which are very compact, the two sides of a A4 sheet. I have here before me. But this question of where does the intellect come in, and the as well as the feelings and the affectivity. He starts off these, but I'll just read it and then say a bit about it. These are rules for becoming aware and understanding to some extent the different movements which are caused in the soul, the good to receive them and the bad to reject them. Um, so you've got three sets of actions there. Firstly, becoming aware, being in touch, taking the space to be in touch with my inner life, especially in terms of spiritual consolation, spiritual desolations, what's happening within me. But that only gets us so far. That's and then uh, to understand to some extent these movements, especially understanding, is this, firstly, is it a spiritual movement? There's all sorts of psychological movements within us, physical movements. Is this something that's impacting on my spiritual life? And understanding, is this a spiritual consolation, spiritual desolation? So that's where the understanding comes in. I suppose that's that vibe thing. What sort of vibe is this that I'm having? But then even that, that's nice to understand that. But then the third one is taking action. So the good to receive them, it's a spiritual consolation. God's blessing me with a particular grace at the moment, a sense of his presence, a desire to serve, being an attraction to prayer, feelings of joy, faith, hope, and love. at a felt level. And the basic action is receptivity, saying, thank you, Lord. I'm basking in this love that you're pouring upon me at the moment, to gratefully receive it with humility. And the bad, if it's a movement of spiritual desolation, a sense of discouragement, a heaviness of heart, being more drawn to earthly things than to spiritual things, then the basic action is to reject it, to act against it. And most of Ignatius's rules, he's got 14 of them, from rule 5 to 14, are about how do I deal with spiritual desolation, because that's where we normally get tripped up in the spiritual life. I'm experiencing spiritual consolation, God feels close, everything's going smoothly, things generally look after themselves. Spiritual desolation is where we get confused. What's going on here? What's happening? So that's, when I'm talking at Hearts Aflame, it'll be largely about, not so much about the decision-making side, but this day-to-day attentiveness to what's happening within me and learning how to grow through spiritual desolation, which is, Ignatius is so practical in his guidance of what are the steps I can take, not just gritting my teeth and getting through this, but it actually is something where I can positively grow in my spiritual life, which is why God allows spiritual desolation, like why God allows anything. It's for our growth, out of love for us.
Yeah. There's a line that comes up, and I think it fits into this perfect. Well, you might be able to talk more into it for me. I'm thinking about doing an episode on it, just on this phrase itself. I think it's from James Clear's book. Name escapes me right now. About habits. It's going to annoy me that I've forgotten that. It's on the table next door. Anyway, moving on. James Clear's book, and he talks about how we don't rise to the level of our goals, but we fall to the level of our preparation. And you're mentioning the consolation and the desolation. So James Clear says, everyone at the start line of a race has the same goal: win the race. But the person who wins, is the person that trained the best, the person whose systems were the best. And bringing it into this spiritual life that we're talking about now, when the gun goes off at the beginning of the race, that's when desolation starts, because all of a sudden you're one of 15 people all trying to get to the end of this 100-meter dash as fast as you can. And so up until that point, you're talking with these people, you're having a laugh, you're eating, drinking, going out with friends, and now you're at the beginning of a race and the gun goes off and oh, now everything's coming. And so you feel that, as you described me, you might feel that heaviness, desolate place. And so I guess it's about, we can use the consolation time well in building, I guess, a good foundation, so that when
Funny you should say that, because Ignatius says exactly that in the 10th rule, that the one who is in consolation think about how he will conduct himself in the desolation which will come after, taking new strength for that time. So if we have an extended period of consolation, again, the first step is, I don't say, I'm in consolation, I better start getting ready for desolation. I mean, that's not
right.
God wants us to savor and enjoy the consolation, and that's already strengthening us and heartening us. But to have a enduring period of consolation, then I can spend some time thinking, how will I handle myself? Will I look back over the rules for discernment so they're firmly in mind, and I don't have to go scramble for them? Because everything can seem very clear in consolation, as you're saying, but once you're in desolation, what seemed so clear a few moments ago now seems very confused, and I don't know where to turn. So the more we have resources at hand, and have them embedded in our minds, these practices that Ignatius suggests, scripture verses that are contrary to the desolations I feel, whatever it is, then so I can do some of that. The other thing he talks about in Rule 14, he has this image of a leader, the captain of an army, attacking a fortress. If they're wise, they're not going to attack at the strongest point, because that's not going to get very far, but they'll spend time surveying the fortress, find where's there a weak point, where's there an entry point. And like we said, that's what the enemy is doing in our spiritual lives, is always not going to attack us where we're strong, but at our weak point. And so that's
Right.
another thing we can do when in
Mm.
consolation, look back, where am I, where am I most vulnerable to spiritual desolation? What are the places where I keep getting tripped up? How can I invite the Lord in to strengthen me in those places so that I'm not so vulnerable?
Yeah, I
So
think
there are
that's
things we can do in consolation. Yeah.
yeah, I think that's a point for discernment as well, like the discernment of knowing yourself. You know,
Yeah.
I liked that you were talking about that the terminology of election, especially because you think of like, especially nowadays when the world's so political, you're thinking, oh, if we're going to elect someone, it could change the whole world. We need to worry about that. It's like, well, imagine you applied that to your whole own life a little bit. you know, let's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
make decisions. Let's elect ideas, and so let's go through them properly. And that matches quite nicely with the mentality of kind of well, just where are my weak points? So if you were going to put if I was going to put me in charge of the country, where am I going to fall down? And I always say this, like, you're criticizing the country, the government, or whatever, and I say there's one thing that's for certain: if I was in charge, we'd be in a much worse spot. And if you don't, if that's not self
Yeah.
awareness, I don't know what is. But
Yeah.
fortunately, I'm not going to run the country. Even if you elected me to, I may say no. But I can think about those things in my life. What are the areas in my life that are important enough for me to take seriously? Obviously, I've got 4 children, a wife, I'm a nurse, a podcaster. What areas of my life should I prepare for so that when the gun goes off at the beginning of the race, I'm not in a blind panic and I know what I'm doing?
Sure.
Um,
And I think that's what, that's why I like giving talks on these. I'll give, 3 hours of talks at Hearts of Flame. Other summer schools will give them 5 hours of talks, even that's too short,
mm,
because it is giving you tools for, a lot of people, especially early in the spiritual life, they have some experience at something like Hearts of Flame, great delight in the Lord and awakening of things within them. Then a few weeks later, suddenly they pray and there's no joy like there was in the previous weeks.
right, yeah,
And
yeah.
we actually think, I've done something wrong. Whereas this is the normal rhythm of the spiritual life, to have periods of spiritual consolation, spiritual desolation.
Mm,
And once I realized that, in fact, and that I can grow through this by navigating it well with the sort of guidance that Ignatius gives, then I can, grow more confident that, this is not a sign of God's displeasure with me. God is wanting me to grow through this, is accompanying me as I grow through this, even if I don't feel His presence. I'm confident that He is present there.
mm,
And so it can be very, he's not writing a theological treatise, he's writing a set of practical guidelines to put into practice.
yeah,
And I think it just helps people to see. I gave a summer school a few years ago. It wasn't just young adults, there was a middle-aged man. He said, why didn't I know this 20 years ago? It saved a lot of heartache. But just realizing the value of the hope, we're in the year of hope this year, the hope that these guidelines can give for those difficult times in the spiritual life. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Two things come to mind. I used to run retreats for um, schools in London and parishes, and we would create these environments of prayer, nice music, ambient lights, and a whole program that's led toward this moment. And people had these amazing experiences in these prayer sessions. And one of my friends turned to me, he's like, are we forcing this? Are we making this happen? Is it real? And another experience a friend of mine had, unfortunately, he used this as a reason to not become Christian, was he went to a church and it was like evening song or something like that. And there was this beautiful choral music, beautiful painting on the wall around these lovely people that he liked. And he said, wow, I think God's real. And then the next day he was like, oh no, it's just all fake. It's just the music and the lights and the sounds and the people. It's like once they're away, it's all not real. So we have these moments of consolation. It's like, but can they be artificial? Should we trust consolation all the time?
Well, I think that's where discernment of spirit comes in, doesn't it? I mean, firstly, on that point, I think as Catholics, we believe grace builds on nature.
Mm.
Um, so if you're going to rule out any of those aids to prayer, like ambience, music, lighting, and all of that, then we'd all be monks in our cell, eating, you know, stale bread and drinking dank water or something our whole lives, so that we're not in danger of confusing anything with a consolation. Um, Ultimately, the test of prayer is not ultimately what's happening in the prayer, but what's affecting my life. Where is this flowing into my life? Is this shaping me as a person who is more
Mm.
loving and faithful and hopeful? Um, but Ignatius doesn't seem to have too much worry about that. If there's an increase of faith, hope, and love, if I have a sense of God's profound love for me in a prayer experience, however that's been channeled by the music or whatever, um, that's a gift only God can give. The enemy's not going to give us a sense of God's profound love for me as I am, or a deep sense of sorrow for my sins because I haven't responded to that love. These are, these are God's gifts, uh, and it's about and um, most consolations. Obviously, if there's something happening in prayer that is pointing me in a particular direction in terms of a big life decision, and that would probably need further discernment, over a period of time. But mostly, it's a sense of I am loved by God. Do not be afraid. I'm with you. It's all really grounded in Scripture and God's word spoken to us in Scripture and throughout the tradition. That's being reinforced in this particular moment of prayer for me. So it's sort of like the objective reality of what has been revealed to us being made a present reality for me now. Um, and
Mm.
and that's a good thing. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
a
yeah. I suppose there's like degrees of, I don't know. It's like there's like degrees of goodness. Like sometimes, like food, it good tasting food is not a spiritual experience, but it's not something we should reject. Therefore, it's like, oh, am I just being, I don't know, is this evil because it tastes so good? Or like, is this
yeah,
leading me astray? This delicious ghetto, uh, but you can enjoy that. You can have it as part of your life. I guess the question is, because I think I've seen this as well in my time in ministry, is like people will come for the praise and worship and leave for the silence, and so we need to, sure, enjoy the praise and worship, allow it to bring you to a deeper spot. And it just comes back to everything we're talking about. Is just that, what are the movements of your heart? Maybe what are the vibes that you are feeling? How are you living just for the vibes, or are you willing to elect an idea based off
sure.
this
Yeah,
feeling?
yeah.
Um,
And the other thing I think the that periods of desolation will come. That's all the saints experience it as a normal part of the spiritual life. So um, uh, if people are worried about being hooked on the consolations or whatever, God's not going to allow that to happen. You can uh, desolation will come, and that's where we are tested. That's where we're called to exercise our faith, our hope, when we're not feeling God's presence. Not
mhm.
There's not a natural sense of hope arising. We need to make an act of hope, um, and
Mm,
again, in seventh rule, Ignatius talks about how God allows desolation so we may resist it. And again, words of great hope. Since I can resist with the divine help, which always remains with me, even though I don't clearly feel it. That's reminded, God is blessing me, is with me, is giving me the grace I need, even though I'm not feeling it. So, I'm not equating um, his presence simply with experiencing consolation. Um,
mm,
for the Lord has taken away from me my consolations, leaving me, however, sufficient grace for eternal salvation.
mm,
That in every moment God's given me the grace I need in that moment. At times that'll be in a felt way where he's allowing me to feel his presence and to easily give myself to that. Other times it's more through that act of the will. Lord, I believe you're with me. I'm not
Mm.
feeling it at the moment, and that's how we grow through spiritual desolation, holding firm to to faith and that confidence that God is with me, even though I'm not feeling His presence at the moment.
Right, yeah. It's really cool because there's a content creator. He's an entrepreneur called Alex Hormozy, and one of his things that he does is he just spits out little bits of wisdom that he's come up with, and they're actually very good things that doesn't come from any Christian background that I'm aware of. And he says one of the greatest skills you can have in life is the ability to feel good, be in a good mood, even when you're not. Deciding to be in a good mood, even when you're not. And I think that fits into what you're saying there. It's like, I can still feel the presence of God even outside of consolation, and that's the superpower that right there. If everything is around you is on fire, it's like that meme. It's like everything's fine and everything is on fire around him. It's like, well, maybe not everything's fine, but you know, there's that line we hear is like joy will come in the morning, and in the not in the AM but in the MOUR. So in your worst place, you can still find joy. You can still find God because He's right there with you, and He's our source of joy. And I suppose it comes back to how do you prepare your life for when the starting gun goes off? Because then when you're in that race, and I guess we all are, whether we like it or not, when you're in that race, you'll have tools to find God. I don't know if a really nice cake would be a place you'd find God, but I suppose it's it's an exterior thing you can reach for in a time of darkness.
Yeah, I think and I mentioned earlier about there are spiritual consolations and natural and non-spiritual ones, spiritual desolations none. So there are natural consolations to enjoy good food, to enjoy a
Mm,
sunset, to enjoy friendship and good music. We're created to be people who respond, with joy to those sorts of things. There's not necessarily a faith element to that, but so they're distinct, but also they can become occasions for it. Enjoying a beautiful sunset at a natural level, but it becomes a moment of praise of God, the Creator, for blessing me with this. Likewise with friendship or wine or whatever. Um, the So to recognize there's a distinction that we talk about spiritual consolation when it's something which is impacting on my spiritual life, my life of faith, hope, and love. Um, but one can become the conduit to open us up to the other. Um, and likewise with spiritual desolation and non, there's a a natural desolation to someone close to us dies and we feel a grief. There's a natural level to that response. Or I've
mm,
been working on some big project that doesn't come off in the way I hoped, and there's
mm,
a natural sort of discouragement.
mm.
Doesn't necessarily impact directly on my spiritual life, but it can become an occasion that flows into that. Um,
Yeah, and I
so
suppose
and that's it's just really important with the rules. Of course, Ignatius doesn't always put the adjective spiritual in, but to be clear, he's always talking about spiritual desolation, spiritual consolation.
mm.
Yeah.
And I suppose that with that would come that self awareness that we've spoken about of um, yeah, the project didn't work, or I had a really bad day at work, or didn't sleep well last night. Um, if we don't take it seriously, if we don't take ourselves seriously, and we don't think about how we're feeling and how that might impact our actions, then we just coast. However, if you can say to yourself, okay, I'm just tired, or it's just a day at work, the sun's going to rise tomorrow. You can set that feeling aside through that self awareness. Like, I feel bad, and I know why I feel bad, and that's not a problem. Um, or like
Well, that's
instead,
exactly right. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I always find there's a fine line, especially nowadays with all the self-help gurus out there. I've mentioned James Clear, I've mentioned a few, Alex Hormozy, and there's like lots of other people out there that I personally listen to and I get a lot out of it. I wonder, is there a risk of over psychologizing? Is there a risk of over psychologizing spiritual realities or discernment uh, to the point where you can say, oh, that's just, that's your dopamine, or that's cortisol, and so, or is this just again, grace builds on nature, use it wisely?
Yeah, I think there's a danger of both extremes, isn't there? Over psychologizing, just not being attentive to particularly spiritual movements, but also I think for some Catholics that sense of psychology is a bit suspect. It's going to lead us astray. All I need is a spiritual solution to my problems.
Right. Yeah.
And I think we've recognised certainly in priestly religious formation, the importance of what they call human formation alongside intellectual, pastoral, spiritual formation. That's important for people to be well grounded psychologically, and to have access to counselling when needed and stuff like that. But you still get people that can over spiritualize is the other problem, rather than recognize no, there are particular, just as because people don't tend to apply this to physical things. They don't say, well, I'm physically sick, so all I need is a spiritual healing. I don't need to see the doctor. But we can apply it to psychological things because they seem a bit more amorphous and a bit more in the spiritual realm or something. But again, it's not recognizing the human nature with which God has blessed us does have physical dimension and a psychological dimension as well as spiritual dimensions, and intellectual, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it'd be a danger on both sides. Yeah, just not recognizing the richness of the human person as a as a embodied person with a psyche, with emotions, with feelings, with spiritual capabilities, with intellectual potentials as well.
Yeah. So it's looking at the whole person and looking at you as a whole person. So there is a spiritual element, there's a psychological element, and there's a physical element, mind, body, and spirit. I feel like those things have been, what's the word, claimed by the modern contemporary times of I can master these things, and I can find an answer for everything in them. And the church is like, yeah, yeah, we know. But there's don't choose just one of them. Don't just become Arnold Schwarzenegger or Mr. Universe. Also become, a psychologist or a spiritual person. I can't think of anyone to reference. Have all those elements, and again, I think we'll all have different elements. I'm not particularly academic myself. It doesn't mean I shouldn't read books. I do probably have more of an inclination towards, the physical in the sense that I like being active and I like doing things with my hands. But like, I also have a podcast, and I also have a set of rosary beads that I use every now and then. But we've been going on for almost an hour now. How you feeling?
Pretty good. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it's been very interesting. Enjoyed this. Yeah.
Yeah, and you've got a lot of really interesting work out there. I was looking at some stuff you did with the Lonergan. Am I saying that right? Lonergan Center.
The Lonergan Centre. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
I can't say
The
Robin. I
the
can't say Lonergan. Um, and so yeah, I'd love to get you back to talk about a bunch of stuff on there. You're talking about like the cultural, bringing cultures into the where I've got it written down here somewhere. Um, yeah, but engaging with cultures and Catholicism, and I think that's super interesting, especially nowadays, and especially in Auckland where we are a melting pot. And so I'd love to talk to you more about that as well. But you're going to be
oh,
here for Heart to Flame. Do you have the
yep.
dates at hand there?
I think it starts about the 30th of December. I think.
It's pretty much the
Yeah.
same time every year. The beginning of the year, what a way to start the year. You've done it a few times. What are some highlights that you've experienced at Heart to Flame?
Well, meeting the young people is always great, and such a dynamic, vibrant. I'm always impressed that every year a considerable number of them are people who are there for the first time. So it's not just people
Mm,
had a great experience coming again, but they are bringing in new people. And as far as I don't know the New Zealand scene very well, but it seems to be the biggest Catholic young adult thing happening. And they get 120,
yeah,
130
they
young
do.
adults there, which is pretty big for New Zealand,
Mm,
and far too many of them from Auckland, of course. So, so there's meeting the people. And I think you just have a good rhythm. You've got the spiritual stuff. We pray morning and evening prayer together, as
mm,
well as mass each day. Of course, you've got inputs. It starts with the first weekend is a retreat, more retreat sort of input, and you have talks on a whole range of different topics. Um, yeah, it's a vibrant, energetic place, and just seeing young people coming, some already quite committed to their faith, others not quite sure why they're there, but tapping into something there and being sustained, supporting each other in their faith is wonderful to see. Yeah,
yeah. I have to say, like, I'm too old to go now, and I've got 4 children, which would just disrupt everything. But I have to say, the experiences I've had at Hearts of Flame, I went there twice, and it's a different place, and it really does set you up for the rest of the year. Well, it sets you up for, a good Catholic kind of knowledge. If you want to know anything about Catholicism, or like what is it like to be Catholic? What could it be like to be Catholic? You have a great experience of liturgy, but you also have a great experience of like more charismatic prayer often, and then just the range of speakers and religious that are there. Um, Really, it's eye opening. I found, and
yeah,
so I
and
can't.
so many vocations that have come from it.
Right,
Yeah,
yeah, and I think that's a really interesting thing to consider for like all Catholics. I'm a convert myself, and I kind of missed the boat on discerning religious life. But yeah, I think it is an option. Just as much as becoming a saint can happen, you can also be a priest. Doesn't necessarily mean you'll become a saint, I'm sure, but it's a good place to start, I
sure.
think.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you've obviously got a very narrow view of vocation,
I
being a
do.
married man. When I say vocations, a number of married vocations that have come through Hearts of Flame, as well as religious
Mm.
and priestly vocations. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
great.
Okay.
But yeah, there's probably not much point advertising it now because I gather they fill up the spots very early on. It's so popular that people book in very early. But
Well, there's always
it's
next year.
exactly, yeah.
And it's also getting excited for what is to come. I mean, I suppose we could have our own hearts aflame by liking, sharing, and subscribing this podcast, listening to all the episodes I put out there, because I speak to some amazing people. But if anyone wants to find out more about the work that you've done, where can they find you, Father Koning?
Where can they find me? Here in Sydney? What do you mean?
Do
I
you have
don't have
any
a.
like online presence or?
Mainly through because I'm the vocations director for the Jesuits in Australia and New Zealand, which is part of our province. So the Australian Jesuit vocation page is my main presence, and the Facebook and Instagram on that. Yeah, I don't have any personal websites or anything. No.
Brilliant. And of course, we'll probably have you back on the podcast. So if you want to hear more from Father Robin, please, yeah, do get on the podcast. So thank you for joining us, Father, and everybody listening. Indeed, thank you for listening. And like I said, you can like, share, and subscribe. Get involved in our mission. We're trying to bring Catholicism to all those in Aotearoa and around the world. So if you like what we're doing, like, share, subscribe, and consider praying and even donating to the mission. I'm doing this all by myself. So if you guys know how to market anything, just give me a shout as well. So thank you for all your ears, eyes, and attention, and God bless.